to move on, and I'm going to introduce Anshul Aggarwal, who is going to speak to us about integral agriculture. A little bit about Anshul. He's a postgraduate student in the East-West Psychology program at the California Institute of Integral Studies. He is also a farmer and lives with his wife in Auroville, India. Drawing inspiration from the wisdom of traditional farming communities in India and Colombia, he has been researching the intersections of food, ecology, society, and consciousness. I turn it over to you, Anshul.
So, thank you, Jonathan. Good evening. Namaste to everyone. Good morning from where I am. Firstly, thank you so much, Devashish, Jonathan, Judy, and all the people who have helped put this conference together. It's a pleasure to be sharing this space with you all. Today, I will talk to you about integral agriculture. A little bit different from what we have heard so far. I will not be talking so much about Auroville because I think that context has been set. Um, I will be talking about a vision for agriculture that could address not only problems of food, but also offer some possibilities of an ecological, social, and personal transformation. To understand what this means, I will explore the meanings of sustainability, um, which I felt was important since that's the title of the conference, and integrality, taking inspiration from Aurobindo and Mother's Integral Yoga, and the relationship between the two and agriculture. So, considering the state of the world today and the challenges we are facing on a planetary, local, and individual level, what does sustainability mean? This is a definition from the 1987 Brundtland Report of the World Commission on Environment and Development. It says sustainable development is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Because of the popularity of the statement, we have come to associate sustainability largely with the environment, economics, development, and management of resources to prolong their availability to us by assuming that we know what we need and that we can also know what our future generations will need. These ideas of sustainability remain anthropocentric and limited to our present consciousness. Sustainability here means trying to go on as further as possible and for as long as possible. Such a definition of sustainability seeks mainly to preserve our most important resource, our planet, our habitat. However, we are now slowly turning to another resource which is crucial in making sure that we are able to preserve our habitat. It is a social resource, our habitus, our relationship with each other. This is something that Deepti, Peter, and Tanya Metal have already mentioned. The world is shrinking and humanity is more globalized than ever. We have access to each other's cultures, languages, food, and so on. And we need to understand each other to be able to work together. We are not only ecological beings, but also hermeneutical social beings. The changing paradigms of modernity and technology require us to reimagine new forms of political, economic, and even social organizations that can sustain our work with each other and in this world. And then finally, we must turn inwards to ourselves. The changes in our habitat and habitus are only possible if, as Sri Aurobindo has suggested, there is an inner transformation, a psychological transcendence from being a human to what can be called the divine, the Brahman, or God. This project of transcending humanity is not rooted in an egoistic, hyphenated post-human philosophy, which seeks to control our environment beyond human capabilities. Rather, it is a project of an unhyphenated post-human dissolution of any identity as a human, coming into contact with others and the world as one being. Therefore, sustainability must be seen not only as an environmental preservation, but as a complex ecological, social, psychological, self-perpetuation phenomenon, self-perpetuating phenomenon, which allows nature to evolve continuously with all its aspects given due consideration. For our sustainable future, we need a new lens to look at the world not as a resource, but as a web of relationships that we have with ourselves, with humanity, the planet, and the cosmos. The synthesis of the ecological, social, psychological, and everything in between takes us to the idea of integrality. Here, I use the word integral, inspired from Sri Aurobindo's philosophy of integral yoga, which proposes a union of all aspects of human being with those beyond human. Similarly, in the landscape of sustainability, we must look for an integral approach which embraces the various parts and relationships of our being. In this approach, human life will not be divided into multiple fields of study, but will become a unified field of plural expression of these relationships. Sustainability, therefore, becomes an outcome of the integral life. However, we must be cautious of what Devashish has called the problem of the integral. We are not seeking a unitary method of application, nor a simple summation of all that exists. We are interested in an integration of all our parts, which also includes the spaces between all that exists, the nuances between the coarseness, and the invisible between the visible. A new kind of agriculture also requires an integration of all its various limbs and parts. Here, I would first like to make the distinction between farming and agriculture. While farming is simply cultivating the land to grow crops that provide food, medicine, fiber, shelter, fuel, and so on, agriculture is literally the culture of the land, or a culture springing forth from a farming community. Agriculture is evidenced to have evolved over the last 10,000 years, but I will argue that humans and their habitats have always evolved with land, and therefore there has been the presence of agriculture in one or the other form since the beginning of humanity. Today, the scope of sustainable agriculture is largely associated with organic and ecological farming, which strives to find a balance between the wilderness and the cultivation of land. Practice of farming that doesn't destroy nature, but enhances it. This is in response to the large scale impact of the industrial agriculture, which started with the so called Green Revolution in the 1960s. Green Revolution offered a modern outlook to agriculture where economics takes precedence over everything else. Large scale production of food using expensive machinery, high yield variety of seeds developed in research stations, and chemically synthesized soil inputs and pesticides were encouraged over small scale subsistence farming. Although the immediate um, results of Green Revolution were phenomenal, with yields getting quadrupled, the long term physical, social, and psychological effects of this shift have been devastating. On an ecological level, this has caused pollution of our soil, water, and loss of wild and cultivated biodiversity. These changes are compounded by the larger ecological crises we face as a result of the techno industrial revolution. A counter movement of organic, ecological, regenerative farming proposes bringing back care for the land at the center of this work and rejuvenating the systems that support the cultivation of food through natural processes. But ecology is only one of the many challenges that make agriculture vulnerable today. The social aspect is perhaps even more difficult to address and forces us to ask if agriculture is at all possible in the decades to come. This chart from our World in Data website shows the drop in the number of people employed in agriculture in these countries. The pattern is the same in any country you pick, and these are just the numbers of people. The drop is even more dramatic if you look at the percentage of the population employed in agriculture as the total population is increasing every year. The trend of people moving from agriculture to an urban culture is on the rise across the world. The degradation of rural life and ecosystems has forced people to migrate to already densely populated cities with the hope of employment and a better life. The move from a village to a city is not only physical, it is a psychological leap from a collective to an individual identity. Families are also not as big as they used to be. And as large families break into smaller nuclei, there are fewer hands on the fields. Mechanization and technology, while being useful in some respects, have disturbed the long held balance of self reliance in agricultural communities. All this has meant a degradation of the culture of the land and poses a real threat to the sustainability of agriculture beyond our time. The sustainability of agriculture is not only about the environment. We must ask ourselves, who will grow our food in the coming decades? We turn now to the topic that we have been discussing so far, this constant tension between the individual and the collective, and how a consciousness can emerge where both of these can be expressed fully. So the conflict in agriculture is also a conflict of interest between the interest of the self and the interest of the social ecological collective. So far, agriculture has evolved in communities where the collective was put before the individual. The long held social and religious dogmas even suppress the individual in order to serve the collective. In retaliation to this, the narrative of the recent past has been of self indulgence. However, the kind of life promised by modernity is not compatible with a culture based on land, lived in harmony with our surroundings and others. The scale of our industrial world today is also at odds with agricultural societies where energy and resources are generally kept within the community, making people responsible towards nature and each other. The international import and export of food, capitalization, and commodification of food have further taken the sacred out of farming and agriculture. As we know now, neither the complete negation of the self nor the unbridled self interest serve the collective or the individual in the long term. For the sustainability of humanity, we need a new culture and social paradigm. We need new cultural and social paradigms where we can realize the highest human potential as an individual and as a collective, not as mutually exclusive goals, but as complementary necessities for growth. The solutions that we seek need to answer two questions. What kind of agriculture can we develop to fulfill the needs of both the individual and the collective? And what kind of agriculture can emerge in communities where both individual and collective are allowed to develop fully? The future of agriculture and the agriculture of the future depends on communities that can embody these cultural and social goals and adapt to the changing needs of our times. Similarly, an ethic of sustainable agriculture can help support sustainable communities. So, while we can see some hints of what this culture could look like in a place like Auroville, and of course, there are other communities where this has been experimented on, they still largely remain questions. And I think that's the beauty of it because we are discovering there is no set answer, there is no single answer. I think as the consciousness of the individuals evolves, these solutions will become more subtle, and more complete, so to say. And then zooming in to the smaller units of these communities, the individual, we find that our modern lives have completely disconnected us from nature and the part of ourselves that is connected intimately to the forces of nature, its cycles, and its rhythms. Food, which is for most of us a basic necessity, is now considered a commodity which can be bought in the market. So while farming seems to continue, the culture of the land is disappearing rather quickly and silently. This disconnection has pushed us to the limits of an externalized world where we are dominated and, as Heidegger would say, challenged forth by rational economic and political forces. As we move from an age of reason to an age where subjective experiences are given their due place, we need new technologies to help us navigate the complex physical realities of the 21st century. We also need, as Foucault has called them, technologies of the self, which prepare us, or rather help us unlearn what we have been taught and remember what we have forgotten over the last few centuries, our capacities for intuition, empathy, and connecting with each other and our surroundings. Agriculture is an interesting technology in this regard and can help us evolve and develop skills for contemplative action. Some people have also called this agricultural spirituality, and it is not a new concept. We have examples in history of Vedic India in the East and Egypt in the West, where deep psychological contemplation thrived in civilizations founded on agriculture. the contribution of these civilizations is in shaping human philosophy and psychology is immense. Even today, we can witness the wisdom of communities based on the land everywhere across the world. Agriculture, therefore, is beyond the cultivation of food. It prepares the individual for communion with nature, to learn about the cosmic forces and therefore themselves. With this as the background, we can see the intricate relationship of agriculture with our lives, not only because of food, but also because of how it fundamentally influences our social and psychological relationships. A new humanity needs a new culture, and for that, a new form of agriculture needs to be worked on. In the integral view of agriculture, the role of the farmer is not restricted to growing food. The soil is cultivated to cultivate the human soul, the nourishment of food not limiting itself to the physical bodies, but also nourishing our aspirations for a higher life, working as a catalyst for individual, social, and ecological transformation. To summarize, we looked at the meaning of sustainability and its scope beyond the environment. Uh, that is the popular understanding. I extended the framework of sustainability to an integral vision where all aspects of life can be synthesized and sustainability then becomes an outcome of integrality. I presented to you the specific example of agriculture and how it fits in the scheme of sustainability and integrality. By separating farming, the activity of growing food, and agriculture, the culture based on land, the culture emerging in farming communities, we can better understand the relationship between the changing culture today and its implications on our agriculture. We then explored the various dimensions of agriculture, the environmental, social, and psychological, and how they are being challenged by the industrial paradigm. However, these are also an opportunity to bring integrality to agriculture, pretty much like Auroville. The current crises are an opportunity to go beyond what's going on and what we have been sort of experiencing. Um, and through that, create a paradigm for a post-human integral transformation. In conclusion, I would suggest that of the many crises that we are experiencing within and around us today, food and agriculture need special consideration. Human nutrition links deeply to the ecological, social, cultural, economic, even political and spiritual relationships. A pursuit towards sustainability requires us to imagine new cultures and goals for humanity and its relationships without and within. These new cultures cannot be based on any fixed ideas, but must be taken as opportunities for learning and discovering what it means to be human and what can the human become. What must the human become to fulfill a sustainable integral life? In these new paradigms of learning and becoming, agriculture can help us connect with our deeper selves, with each other, and with our ecology. As much as we need food of the highest quality for the evolution of our consciousness, the activity of farming and growing food should also be utilized to develop learning environments where people can observe the laws of nature and their true selves. Taking inspiration from Aurobindo's philosophy and practice of integral yoga, a form of agriculture may be imagined where the individual, collective, and ecology are not separate entities, but in fact offer support to each other for their progress and transformation. An agriculture that is sustainable must be integral in its approach, offering us the opportunity to reclaim our natural resources, reimagine our social relationships, and transcend our psychological boundaries towards a new reality. Such a culture based on land presents a new way of seeing, even a new way of being, and eventually opening up to a way of becoming, again a part of the whole, and embracing the whole as part of ourselves. Thank you.
Thanks, Anshul. I have no questions here from the attendees, but anybody would like to ask a question, please do. Please.
Anshul, very nice to be a little bit with you again. Bravo, that was wonderful. Can you speak about how the agriculture of the land, in your experience, informs the agriculture of your own self? If that makes sense.
Very much.
Sorry, I didn't get the last word. Agriculture of the.
Yeah, of your own self.
Okay,
Yes. Okay.
sure. Um, so I mean, this is based on whatever I've been sharing with you. This is based on my experiences with farming and agriculture in the last 9 years. And the reason I got into all this was because I was just seeking something different from what I had been taught, and I came to Auroville, and I realized that I even though I'd spent 20 years studying in a school or in a college, I literally knew nothing. And what really struck me was that I don't know how to build my house, I don't know how to grow my food, and what kind of education is this? Which taught me all these beautiful things, but not the basic stuff that I really need. So my initial sort of experiments with agriculture or with farming were basically to grow my own food and nothing else. I had this idea of going into the mountain and having a small house and living by myself. At that point, I had not read Aurobindo so much, so so that was my ideal. But then gradually, I mean, I did that for a while, and slowly I got into. I mean, because I wouldn't call that farming. Farming is more when you're growing food for more people. Um, Growing food for yourself is more like gardening, because then you're not getting your livelihood from that. I think farming is really a bit more intense. And over the years, I have learned a lot about farming, about soil, about plants, but I think what I have learned most is about myself. And this is something, this is the this is the point that I'm trying to make with this, whatever I presented, because this journey is endless. I mean, people have spent 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, 70 years on the soil, and they're still figuring out, things about how to grow things. And people in Auroville will tell you, I mean, the foresters who came here and they started planting in the 70s, 80s, I mean, they're still excited about a new plant and how certain, plants work, etc. But I think the value that we get out of it is more about learning something, or observing something in nature which connects deeply with us, and then you realize that this is exactly how I work. I mean, why is it a separate thing? Why growing food, or why trees are considered as a separate being? Because we have similar, we live, we die pretty much like any other plant. We have a microbiology much like the soil. We have patterns and rhythms of our moods, much like the day and night, and the moon and the sun. So once you start tuning into that, you get in touch with yourself. So I think this is what you're referring to, in terms of the agriculture of the land and the agriculture of the self. I mean, I think they're in agriculture, they both are implicit. They are part of that. Otherwise, it doesn't exist.
Thank you. Thanks, Anshul. Yeah. Thank you. I'm gonna. Ananta here has a question.
Hello, Anshul. Namaskar. Yes, nice to be with you from our parting and meeting moment. So lovely. You brought many deep reflections and questions, including what I thought very interesting is the whole question of the individual and the societal or the collective. But with Sri Aurobindo, the challenge is also an evolutionary transformation of both the individual and the collective. So my query is that how agriculture can be engaged in that process. And the question therefore is not only agriculture helping in the evolutionary process, but also whole evolution of agriculture. In contemporary agriculture, technology is playing a role in various ways. So my question therefore is, how do we engage with technology? For example, M.S. Swaminathan has a very deep perspective of evergreen revolution. and what would be a place for a dialogue between Sri Aurobindo initiated agriculture, and Swaminathan himself was the chairman of the Auroville Foundation. And my third query is that in terms of culture, agriculture is also creativity. Many agricultural communities have traditions of singings, and it is emergent, spontaneous. How it is flowing in your life? Because speaking about the poetic, we need to bring that poetic into practice of agriculture as an evolutionary force.
Thank you, Anandaji. So I think I will first try to address this question of technology. Personally, I was very resistant to technology when I started, and but I think eventually, and also reading a bit more from Sri Aurobindo, I realized that these are tools that need to be used in a certain way and in the right place. So I don't think, as such, any particular technology, even Green Revolution or whatever it has to offer, we should just reject it. But I think we should put it in perspective and see how it can be used to empower the communities rather than disempower them. Because I think what is happening right now is certain technologies are being offered which take the agency away from the individuals and the communities. And then we become more and more dependent on them. And yeah, we just don't, we lose a part of the learning which has always been there of self-reliance and understanding. For example, a simple example would be a soil test. You know, in agriculture, we have a soil test, and the labs will tell you they can test this and that, and you give them a sample, and they'll give you 30 to 40 parameters of what the soil contains. And I don't have a problem with that, but I think the best test of the soil is when the farmer is walking on the soil and when the farmer is holding the soil and smelling the soil. So I think this connection is important, and the technology can be used as an extension of the learning process. So in that respect, I think they all have place, but it just needs to be seen the context and how it all fits. About the individual and the collective and how agriculture can participate in that, I think the the attitude of service is somehow missing in our current paradigm and discourse, and especially in integral yoga we have this idea of service to the divine consciousness. So it's not so much about or Diti mentioned about I'm serving, Shivandu said, I'm serving humanity and I'm serving divine. It's because in that paradigm, which is probably too idealistic for us right now, working for the individual or working for the collective is the same thing. You're serving a larger purpose of evolution of consciousness. So I think agriculture, because it gives you that space where you are working on yourself and you are working for other people because you're growing food for them, it's very important, because I think a farmer has to embody that consciousness, which will then be available through the food to the people who are eating it. And I think that's why the current problem with our system is we are happy to go to the market and buy the fruits and vegetables. Maybe they're organic, maybe they're not organic. That is not the problem. But I think the state of in which the farmers are right now, especially, I mean, this is happening across the world, but we hear stories about farmers committing suicides in Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, etc., etc. And my question is, we talk about carbon footprint, we talk about water, water footprint, and all sorts of footprints. We are not talking about the footprint of consciousness. And what is the consciousness imbibed in that fruit or vegetable that is built on the suffering of from a farmer? And that, I think, is very important for us to at least I'm trying to see how it's applicable in a community like Auroville, and I think it's possible more and more in smaller communities. But if a farmer is not in the right state of mind, how can he or she grow the right kind of food is a question. So I think that it gives that opportunity agriculture gives that opportunity to work on both the individual and the collective. And you had one more question about the emergence of the creative in agriculture. Yeah, just give me 1 second, sorry. So I don't know how to answer that because I have a personal relationship with that. I don't know if you're asking on a more sort of communal, collective level, which manifests in different ways.
Thanks, Anshul.
I have a
Yeah.
question.
I had them too, but you go.
Okay.
Okay. Ladies.
Good to see, well, no, I've not spoken all for, anyway. Angela, it's so good to hear your perspective. And I know we've had this conversation, but I was wondering if you could tell us what are you doing to bring in more people that would be helpful to succeed in providing the food to the Auroville community? How are you giving them the perspective of providing services the way for them to go forward in their development?
Yeah, I think that's too much. I'm not really trying to bring anybody to do anything, to be honest with you. I think what I'm really trying to do is go with this vision as far as I can in my own life and practice that. What I am encouraging though is to have more and more people join us in the work that we're doing. And there I don't call it integral agriculture or this or that. I think this has to emerge slowly. I think we have to create cultures where people would feel welcome and where their personal growth is also valued. And from that, I think this will emerge organically. So I don't really think that. I mean, this is more my exploration of how I see it. I don't think integral agriculture will become like a school where we are going to teach people how to do this or how to do that. I don't have that in my mind right now. So what I'm doing is I work on a farm here in Auroville, which is a very old farm. It is actually the first farm of Auroville, and it's a big farm, so it allows for including as many people as we can. And I have been reaching out to people and saying, please come to the farm and work with us. And if I am able to create a culture where a little bit of this is possible, that people can see this happening, I would be, I would feel that I am doing the right thing, so to say. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Mary. What? Oh, that's fine. Thank you, Anshul. I could listen to you speak for hours about agriculture. Thank you so much. It's a joy to be with you again, sharing a little time. Just a brief comment. I mean, just what you said, making a distinction between farming and agriculture, that was so beautiful, because people tend to, to speak about agriculture as something that's only 10,000 years old. Thank you so much for acknowledging that the connection with the land has been here since time immemorial. Thank you. That alone has just made my day. So it's just, I mean, while I was here, I just looked up the etymology of farming and agriculture. And of course, agriculture comes from culture, like living cultures. It could be yogurt, but farming is about settling, and it's about being, not nomadic. So thank you so much for making that distinction, and thank you so much for everything you do in your life, because you live in an organic way. So you are creating the soil of consciousness. I just really appreciate it. Appreciate you. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Ben.
You're welcome. I have I have one more question just from online because yeah, I'm sorry. We'll take one question from online if that's all right, because we haven't had too many. And it's from Haman. And his question is whether more people need to get involved in agriculture in your assessment, given the trends that you shared, or is it possible to sustain integral, sustainable agriculture with so few people that are involved today?
We absolutely need more people. There is no question about it. Also, because I mean, there are two reasons for that. One is we need people to grow food, and like I already mentioned, that the number of people. I mean, I have experienced this in rural communities, which are predominantly agriculture communities. This is probably the last generation of farmers that we have right now, and the youngest of them is maybe 35. That would be the youngest. On average, it's like in the 40s, early 50s. So I mean, I may be exaggerating, but I really don't know in 30 years, 40 years, who are the new farmers, because their children are not going to farm. They don't want their children to farm anymore. They want their children to go to the cities, get a job, get a car, an apartment, the modern life. And I understand that. And I think I truly respect that because they haven't had that experience. The movement backwards, or the other way around, not backwards, the other way around, from the cities to rural communities or agriculture communities is not so much. And even what I'm saying is that even when we move from cities to an agriculture community to take up agriculture, we don't have the necessary skills and the attitude to work on the land, and it's a long learning curve. And I'm still learning. I'm still at the very beginning of it. So we need more and more people, definitely. And I think we need more people also to get involved in this work, not only because we need people for growing food, but I think it's an antidote to the current sort of modern external paradigm where you can actually connect with the soil, you can connect with the food, you can connect with the plants and follow the rhythms of nature. So I think even from an educational point of view, I think it's very important that this becomes a part of the education paradigm, either in small communities or in cities somehow.